While interviewing people waiting for their luggage at SeaTac Airport on New Year's Day, I met Chris, who was waiting to pick up his girlfriend after a family trip. Chris grew up in a family with conservative American values. In this interview, we discuss the way Chris's attitude towards patriotism has changed, and why the way you were raised doesn't always reflect the truth about the world. My name is Nick, and this is Conversations on the Coast. Morning.
Morning.
Are you waiting for bags?
No, waiting for somebody picking up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you're going to be here for a little bit?
Yeah.
Are you interested in doing a short interview while you wait?
Perhaps. What's the topic?
Cool. So my name is Nick, and I do a podcast called Conversations on the Coast.
Yeah.
I talk to people about their beliefs through a process called Navigating Beliefs.
Yeah.
And we use critical thinking to kind of unpack the justifications and reasons for why you hold your belief.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah, what you got?
Yeah. What's your name, or what can I call you?
Chris.
Chris.
Yep.
Yeah, good to meet you.
Yep, nice to meet you.
And so you got people coming in today from...
Yeah, my girlfriend went to St. Louis to pick up her son, who went to go see his father for a few days. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yep, picking her up.
That was like a family holiday trip?
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
Awesome. That's good.
Yeah.
So, so what I do is I talk to people about something they believe or something they're convinced of.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be usually more interesting if it's something that kind of colors the way you treat people,
Okay.
the way you move about in the world.
Okay.
Maybe something that if you became convinced it wasn't true, it might change things for you. Somehow.
Okay.
So is there something in your life that that fits that description that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, probably a lot. What's a good one?
You know, it can really be anything, because at the end of the day, it's really about talking about the methods you use to figure out what's true,
Yeah,
and less
yeah.
about the actual belief.
Yeah, I would probably say more about the methods, kind of like how maybe the opinions or the way that, the opinions you hold, and how they were formed, and to the degree that they are true or not, or they've changed over time, you know? So,
Indeed.
I definitely find, like, most of the opinion, I don't know if I'd say most, but maybe the why a lot of the opinions that I hold have changed over time, you know, and more so the reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's something that you have an opinion of or belief of that's changed?
Yeah, you know, I would, a lot of these are probably pretty confidential, but I think growing up I probably had a very strong belief in patriotism, the order of society, the rule of law, that, you know, our nation is the best, and, you know, these, and maybe they would be manifested in some political beliefs at the same time.
Okay.
But I've really come to believe that those things are, particularly the reasons that I held those beliefs are definitely inaccurate, you know, inaccurate. And in fact, some of those beliefs I actually am kind of embarrassed that I used to hold, you know?
I see.
So,
Awesome.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
I assume that, well, I'd love to hear about, now, whether or not you're willing to talk about what you used to believe that you're now embarrassed in.
For sure, you know, I would say, you know, I went to, just growing up in family, and at the time I think it came, but, you know, I think it's kind of somebody, you know, we're similar ages, you know, but if you're in the, you know, your mid-40s or into your mid-50s, I think the world has changed significantly. And I think, if, in my opinion, willing to kind of look around and examine those beliefs we hold and the things that have happened in our lifetime, be like, man, is that really the case, you know? And so I could say, you know, if we look at the wars that our country has been involved in, is still, and to this day, if you look at it, to some degree, if they were ever justified, you know, I don't know. And, you know, I would, I would say if anybody came to my backyard and had sending people to go raid my neighbors' houses, and no matter what the justification is, you know, I'd be that guy's terrorist, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I have a lot of friends who spend a lot of time doing that kind of work and have similar thought processes, you know?
Yeah.
And really, what do we have to show for it? Except money spent.
Yeah.
People still, if they, for whatever reason they didn't like us, they still don't like us. And all this money was lost, the treasure, you know, and we're no better off for it.
So
But at the time, I was like, oh yeah. God, I don't want to swear. It's my bad.
I mean, it's fine.
Fine I'm gonna try to be professional.
Sure.
But it's like, oh yeah, let's go get those guys.
Yeah.
And really, I think that's.
So are we like? Let's get down to some more specifics. So I can kind of get a better pin on what you're talking about. So are we talking about like Desert Storm? Or are we talking about 9/11?
That one, and I think. To some degree, there could have been some justification in Afghanistan. To some degree, but the more and more we are departed, and I think probably not. Like it may be a little retrospect and see what did it get for us.
Yeah.
Probably helps temper some of that. But I think the.
So if we went back to that, like the first time we invaded Iraq.
Yep.
And yeah, I was around there. There was talk about weapons of mass destruction.
Yep.
So at the time, did you believe that the war was justified? Is that what you believed? I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'm trying to figure out.
Probably yes.
Okay.
But I think that was not an elegant or not a very intellectual or a moral basis for that argument.
So what was, like, if we were to rewind the clock, what was your justification for believing
probably
at the time?
I'm 22 years old or whatever, and wave the American flag, and the government's saying this is what we should do, and covered in red, white, and blue, and okay.
So reflecting that back to you, it sounds like you're saying at the time when you were 22, anything the government said, you just automatically
or maybe more so positions of authority.
Okay.
I'd say for me, I'd use the term authority.
Okay.
Yeah.
I realize you don't believe that anymore.
Yep.
I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question.
Sure,
Let me try asking it this way and see if it works. And maybe I'm asking your 22-year-old self.
Okay.
Maybe that's the right thing
we can
to
try
do.
We can try to answer it like that.
Why is what an authority says a good reason to believe something is true?
Probably a lot of conditioning, So you're a child, you're raised to respect the authority of your parents. I think for me, I kind of took a lot of things like that very literally, and my parents said it, so that's what I need to do.
Okay.
So you respect the authority of peoples in position of power. Mm-hmm. They're competent. They're there for a good reason. They have your best intentions in mind, and and it's the right thing to do to to be obedient. Yeah, and to defer to them.
Does any of that belief remain? In other words,
very, very much. There's some nostalgia.
Okay.
There's some nostalgia around that. I think it's maybe a little bit more of a simple world perspective. But not much of that remains. No.
But maybe some. Like if we were going to do a pie chart, let's say I don't know whether your parents are still living, but let's say if they did, if your father say told you something. Would you believe it, and why? I guess that's a pretty vague hypothetical.
Yeah, I understand. I think I understand, but kind of like another portion of the discussion. I think I kind of have a little bit of I don't know if falling out's the right word, but my mom passed a few years ago, and since then the relationship with my dad is a little bit strained, and he's getting older, right? So it's like less than ideal all the way around.
Right.
But
it might not be a good example, because what I'm trying to get to is you formerly had this, you put a lot of weight on authority.
For sure.
And you put less weight on authority now.
For sure.
So what I'm trying to think of is if somebody in a position of authority tells you something, what percentage of your belief or not belief is due to their authority, and what percentage is due to other things, and then maybe what are those other things?
It's so small. Like I don't have much use for it anymore. Really, honestly, a little slice that's nostalgic. And thinking of a simpler time, but
So if somebody in a position of authority tells you something, says this is a fact,
I'm immediately dismissive. So now I'm to the point where I'm dismissive.
So you flipped all the way to the other side.
Yep. Probably to a fault.
Okay.
But I think there's good reasons for that too.
How could you how would you figure out for yourself whether to believe them or not?
I think there's some, it depends on the situation, right? So, or on the example, there's some things I'd say that are like so far outside of my day to day and my sphere of influence, more like on a global scale.
Okay.
Or man, like, I don't really know,
Yeah.
But in things that are within my wheelhouse or that are in my sphere of influence, then, that I can observe what's going on around me and make a more informed decision, right?
Okay.
So, on the global scale, like, I don't really know, right? Like, it's hard to say, I think the lines that were sold in the media and stuff like that, I think are designed to gather an emotional support for a certain narrative or agenda that are so outside of my control.
Yeah.
But, I look at something, I kind of have some work in the fitness space too, and I look at that and, like the food pyramid, for example, is like upside down. It's fucking total bullshit.
Yeah.
And the medical industry, it's all total bullshit. If you want to get healthy, you got to do some work and you have to eat well. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of discipline.
Okay.
Maybe some people around you who help motivate a little bit and keep you on the straight and narrow.
Yeah.
But in that case, I know, and I have some resources of people who put a lot of thought into it, and this is pretty, this is valuable information, right?
Yeah.
And I think typically when you get to an answer that it's not easy, it's not black and white. Like a couple things can be true at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's like that seems more like reality than something simple or black and white. Or take this pill because it's easy.
Yeah.
That's just not, in my opinion, that's not reality.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I heard something really interesting when you started that bit there, which is it sounded like you like when I asked somebody in authority says something, how do you know for yourself whether it's true? And you said you didn't know, you weren't sure. And first of all, good for you for admitting you don't know, because I think that's a great position to start from. But how would you figure out? Or how do you figure out? So somebody in a position of authority says, I don't know what. The vaccine has been controversial, right?
Sure, right.
So somebody says, hey, the COVID vaccine is safe and effective, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to believe that because an authority says it. How do you determine whether you're convinced of that or not?
I would say in that department, I would, this is kind of another one that I've had going back when my daughters are born, I'd probably do things differently.
Interesting.
But
okay.
and this kind of comes back to some of my fitness stuff and understanding the medical industry.
Yeah.
My mom at the time before she got sick, she was really sick. She had metastatic melanoma, and she actually worked for the CDC. And she was a contractor. She started as a contractor, and then she went as an employee at the end.
Okay.
And I remember this was probably 2010-ish. And 2010, somewhere around there, 2010 to 2015.
Okay.
And I don't remember the name of the program, but my mom, basically they were, so the CDC was performing some studies, and they were using the same process to repeat the study and getting repeatable results, but the process was always the same. So I'm using a different process to try to verify the hypothesis.
Yeah.
And so she developed another process. They built a big money, $1 billion facility to run this parallel set of processes, and they got different results.
Okay.
So, and then at that point in time, I had some other things I was interested in. There's this. It turns out to be depending on your position of life and abortion and things like that. That there's in the vaccine space, there has been times in studies where tissues from aborted fetuses are used in that industry, and they replicate cells, and it's very deep, right?
Yeah.
So already initially I was, I guess in terms of the COVID thing, not really down. And at that point for myself, I already had this massive shift in the medicine industry, health, fitness, what's being sold generally, because I see it in society, right?
Sure.
And so I'm not really down with what you're selling.
Okay.
So for me, I think I was maybe a little bit ahead of the curve, that from the very instant or the very conception, like, I'm not really interested in what you're selling, because I see this generally, that what's being sold, I see it with my own eyes.
Okay.
I don't know the reason, but generally what's being sold is not conducive to people's health and fitness, because I see it with my own eyes.
So what method then? So would you say the method you used to form your belief that the vaccine was not? You're not. It doesn't sound like you're saying it's bad, but maybe like what?
Yeah, I would just say that. I guess I would say that. Yeah, I don't think I'd go so far as saying that it's nefarious, right?
Yeah.
But it's a tool to make money.
Okay.
And
what methods did you use to become convinced that that's true?
Oh, well, I would say I don't know. I do not know who owns the intellectual property on that one.
Okay.
But I do know this, when my mom worked for the CDC, I heard this, and I don't know what the source was, but that a lot of these vaccines, particularly for children, the intellectual property is owned by the government. It's like, interesting.
Okay.
I asked her. She's like, oh, I didn't know that. So she did some research through people. I think there's both NIH and CDC and Office of patent holding, something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, they own patents. So,
okay.
So how can it be that they own a patent, they license the patent to the pharmaceutical industries to manufacture something, then they collect royalties on the production,
right,
and then they set what the vaccination schedule should be.
Okay.
Seems like a little bit of conflict of interest.
Okay.
And I kind of a little bit, but the similar kind of thought process, right?
Yeah.
So something doesn't quite add up, and I'm gonna take a pass.
Okay. So it sounds like the method you used was to look at information about ownership and
sure, and trying to go to the source, right? Trying to find the source data, not what somebody's telling me, or not what's even to some degree in a book, or on a podcast or anywhere else in the mainstream media, but trying to find like published data or something that is maybe some source, or what the ingredient list is on something.
Okay. How do you find good published data to support a belief like that?
I think it's pretty tough, because you can find data to support any position you want, right?
Okay.
So
if you can find data to support any position you want, why is data that you read a good reason to believe something?
Well, you have to be careful what you read. So maybe
how do you
evaluate
sources, right?
And I guess to some degree, if we validate sources based on they have similar opinions to us, right? And we agree, and we can take that both ways, right?
Is that a good way to decide something's true?
Maybe not all the way, right?
Yeah. If something agrees with your position, is that a good reason? Is that a good reason to believe it's true?
Probably not, right?
Probably not.
Yeah.
So how do you evaluate sources? What's a better way, maybe?
Yeah. I would and I guess I'd say trying to distill to source information, right? So if it's something that the CDC says, we can look at their information. If it's to the lowest common denominator of where we can find something.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd say the less emotion or layers of distance that are put on there.
Okay.
Of levers of reference, the better.
Can you unpack for me what you mean by lowest common denominator?
Sure. I would say if who owns a patent, and if .gov patent office who says Jim Smith at this address owns this patent, and I can look up the revenue he gets. Okay, so he has an interest in this patent and some financial influence from it, right? So to some degree like that.
Going back to the beginning, when you're talking about authorities and what authorities say, to what degree do you believe something that's published on a government website, to what degree is that or is that not still an authority telling you something, as opposed to, how do you know whether to trust that data?
I guess, it depends what it is, right? And a press release or something like that, or some number. And at some point, could those numbers be fabricated? Sure. But, I would say maybe if you find something that is kind of counter to the narrative, then maybe there's some value in it, that it could be reliable in some way, or if the revenue from this patent is this $1 million to this person.
Yeah.
Like, okay. In some way I don't have another way to disprove that, right? But it's just maybe one data point.
Right.
And if I had a number of data points that lined up, then put a little more validity into it.
So a number of data points from the same organization?
I would say more is better, right? But I think depending on what the data point is, maybe there's not a lot of more.
Yeah.
If it's revenue out of patent, there's probably not a lot of sources, but if it was maybe something that I can observe, would be, give me 1 point, say it was in like the health space or something. I say, I can see the leaflet or the recommended guidance on some product, the money that somebody can make or not make in a given path, and just kind of try to navigate some understanding,
right?
And of what that yields, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once you've formed an opinion about something, right? You've looked at these studies. You've maybe looked at peer review of those studies.
Yeah.
You've formed that for yourself. What's something that can raise your confidence in the conclusion that you've drawn? Maybe the degree to which you can maybe apply that to your own situation or something that's in your sphere of influence to kind of help corroborate, right? Okay. And then at some point, some level of faith or acceptance, that all right, that's enough. I don't need to go deeper, or I'm gonna, hang my hat on this and go with this one, and. So I have other priorities too, right? So, and maybe depending on the severity or how important that is, how much effort and or credibility would lend to something. So it sounds like you're saying, if you become convinced of something, and then you have some personal experience or some personal connection to it, that would raise your confidence.
Yeah.
Am I capturing that right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Why is your personal connection to something a good reason to raise your confidence?
It was something that I could observe with my own senses.
Okay.
Or I guess that would kind of be similar to the layers we were talking about before.
Yeah.
Is, of course my own senses can mislead me to some degree too, right?
That was going to be my next question, right? Is it possible to use your senses and come to a false conclusion?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, probably as people, we're very prone to that. I think we all are.
Okay. Yeah. So is that a good reason to raise your confidence in a belief that you hold?
Maybe it's not that there's a good one, it's a less worse.
Okay.
Maybe a not as bad method.
I mean, if you have a bunch of pieces of evidence and you add another piece of evidence, if the evidence is maybe not of questionable quality, does adding a new piece of evidence make the case stronger?
A piece that's questionable?
Yeah.
That could probably go both ways, right?
A piece that could be used to come to false conclusions or true conclusions.
Yeah, I guess if you were to accept that, to maybe, if there was some case where you could firmly say, this is better, this is worse, and it was not ideal, and it steered you towards the better choice, then maybe that's kind of misleading yourself, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, okay, this one's not so great, I'll disregard it and look for something better, or but again, kind of some discernment.
How do you decide? Discernment. That's an interesting word.
Yeah.
I've heard that in lots of different contexts. How do you decide which are the better reasons to believe and which are the worst reasons to believe?
I guess to some degree, I guess, I've also kind of come, I think there's it depends on the topic, right? But some moral foundation. Mm-hmm. And the degree with that moral foundation focuses your view on the world, and like, and where that comes from, that's like a whole nother rabbit hole, right?
Yeah.
But I think that
how does your moral foundation relate to the truth of a belief?
So I think I think moral foundation is truth, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So and
Can
how
you explain
how
what
you
you
get
mean
there?
by that?
Yeah, that say God or the universe is truth.
Okay.
And now how you try to understand that is super deep and very, very difficult. But I think that's what that is, right?
Okay.
And whatever it is, it is.
Yeah.
That's like, but we're never gonna know. But trying to navigate that path.
But if we can't know, how can that help us discover what's true?
I guess it's a search, right? So something you're searching. I think we have an innate desire, or like some longing that makes that, I think, of interest to most people. And I think even if we get if we say that there is nothing more than this life and what we see, that's still an opinion. That's the opinion you formed. I'm not sure how to dive that one a little bit deeper, but I think there is a truth, and we don't get to decide what's true or not. Yeah. We just have to try to find and seek and understand it to the best of our ability.
Right. Is it important to you that that the things you believe are true?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So maybe I'll leave that. I'll leave you with that. It's like, how do you, if you can't know, how do you figure out what to believe?
Yeah, and I would just come back to some moral foundation, and then and for me that would be, it's not okay for me to use force to impose my view on you, and that if I were to impose force on you, then you are justified to use whatever force is necessary for you to protect yourself from me, right? And so the initiation of force and some like basic principles that stealing other people's property is immoral, that at least for me, that's kind of what the informs my outlook, and then that goes to outsourcing those too. So that come back to where we're talking about the military efforts and stuff like that. Yeah. At the same time, where it's not okay for me to forcefully impose my view on you, it's also not okay for me to outsource somebody else using force on you. Yeah. So if I were to say it's not okay for me, but I'm going to have that agent of the state come against you armed, that's immoral as well. So.
Cool.
I know.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. This has been delightful.
Where do I find yourself?
Let me pull up my QR code, and you're interesting to talk to. I wouldn't mind chatting with you again sometime if you're up for it.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll give you the. Let me see if I can find my QR code in here. Here it is. So that leads to my podcast. It's on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can listen to some of those and see what you think, and then
awesome.
Reach out if you're interested in chatting again.
Awesome. You live around here?
Yeah. I live actually I live part-time in Seattle and part-time out on the coast in Westport, which is why the podcast is called Conversations on the Coast.
Yep.
But today I'm doing baggage claims, which is.
Did you come up here just for this?
Yep. People are here waiting for physical baggage. I'm talking to them about their psychological baggage.
Yeah, we all have that too.
Yep, indeed. All right.
Also, it was a pleasure.
All right, Chris.
Catch
you
you
have
later.
A great day.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, and Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too.
You've been listening to Conversations on the Coast, a series from Washington State featuring civil conversations using street epistemology to explore what people believe and why. Find out more at streetepistemology.com.